So I am Professor Napoli, and we are with Danny Friedman and Lena Mazziui, and we are going to talk a little bit about Vietnam Veterans of America and the return of soldiers from abroad, their time abroad. It's not about the war itself, although that comes into the matter, but the questions have to do with the reception of soldiers when they return, and what do they do with those experiences? What do they make of their time abroad? And the way I've always thought about this is, in some ways, for young men of Danny's generation, going to Vietnam was a little like going to college. I have to put it that way because it's roughly the same time period, right? You take those formative experiences, like your formative experiences doing whatever it is, Comp 101, and you got to learn to use it. It's got to be. It turns into the essence, the essential learning about the way the world operates. And so Vietnam veterans brought that information back with them and turned it into a movement here in the United States. And I'm not going to say too much more, except that I'm very proud to both introduce to introduce both my friend Danny Friedman and my TAO research assistant Lena Mazziui. And I'm going to stop right there and turn the
Can I put up the presentation?
You got a presentation?
Yeah. I'm
glad to do it.
Okay.
I'm glad to do it. Yeah.
One second.
You guys stop recording and we'll redo it.
Okay, that's fine. That's my fault.
Have a great conversation.
That's my fault. Okay. I'd first like to thank everyone for coming here. Everyone that I invited. So I'll start with my thesis for the project. That Vietnam Veterans of America was a turning point in U.S. history. The modern American perception of the gallant and respected soldier is largely due to the work done by the organization and their perseverance. VVA's legacy is their position as a walking point for all veterans, even when they will cease to exist. The VVA's motto, "Never again will one generation of veterans abandon another," continues to ring true. Unfortunately, John Rowan wasn't able to make it today, but I would still like to acknowledge that he contributed a large part to my research. These two Vietnam veterans who helped to pioneer the Vietnam Veterans Movement and Vietnam Veterans of America, which we will be discussing here today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce John Rowan, who was a Vietnamese linguist in the Air Force in Vietnam in 1967. He was part of the 6,988th Electronic Security Squadron. And he was with Vietnam Veterans of America since its founding days in 1978 with Bobby Muller, who you are very well acquainted with, and served on various national and state boards of the organization. He ended up becoming VVA's national president in 2005 and stayed in that position until 2021. For the past few decades, he has worked within the VVA, other VSOs, and New York City offices representing veterans and advocating for issues such as PTSD awareness and education benefits. He is a current member of VVA Chapter 32 in Queens. John also has a connection to CUNY as he graduated from Queens College with an MS in Urban Studies. Danny Friedman, a two-time Purple Heart recipient, served in Vietnam during the infamous Tet Offensive, where he was assigned to the 199th Infantry Brigade. After returning home, Danny became involved with Vietnam Veterans Against the War, finding the VVAW to be too politic-focused and not focused on veterans. He found a place in Vietnam Veterans of America in the early days. He was a founding member of the Brooklyn Chapter 72 and continues to serve as president of the chapter. He also worked as a veterans counselor for New York State at the VA hospital in Brooklyn, which became a space for Vietnam veterans to gather. Danny also has a CUNY background as a Kingsborough Community College graduate, and he also took a few classes, or one class, right, here at Brooklyn College. So we'll start with what Vietnam Veterans of America actually is, because I've just been constantly mentioning it and not explaining what it is. So VVA is a nonprofit organization formed in the late 1970s out of frustration for the United States government and public's disregard of those who served in the Vietnam War and concern for the suffering veterans and their families. After more than 50 years, Vietnam Veterans of America is still the only national organization dedicated to Vietnam veterans. It began as the Council of Vietnam Veterans and transformed into Vietnam Veterans of America in the summer of 1979. Throughout the years, VVA has had an incredible impact on Vietnam veterans and beyond, including descendants. A lot of the organization's early work included educating the public. Danny recounts traveling with his chapter to different high schools, educating students on what the Army experience is like and on the reality of Vietnam veterans. Danny also worked extensively on supporting homeless veterans and contributed to the development of the Homeless Veterans Resource Guide and the Homeless Veterans Pocket Handbook. I want to start, can you talk a little bit about your experience going around to schools and talking to younger people, like men who 18, 17, who were interested in enlisting, and kind of the conversations you had with them?
Yeah, actually, most of the schools we went to were middle schools, where the students were in the 12 to 14 range. I remember going to a couple of high schools, South Shore and maybe Madison, where I graduated. I think I remember going there once. We tried to, we knew that there were recruiters going speaking to the students in the high schools. And we wanted to, the teachers had the principal invite us to give a counterpoint of view. And basically we just said, listen, there's nothing wrong with enlisting in the military, but you got to understand what you're getting into. Right now, at that point, the military was fighting in what we considered an unwinnable war, and we considered the wrong war because it was. I was gung-ho when I went over Vietnam, and I learned through my 1 year spending, in the boondocks and the villages and wherever, that we weren't there to save the people, so much as we were there just to keep the government in power, so there wouldn't be a communist government. I don't think those people cared what government they had, as long as people stopped bombing them, So we just told these guys and gals, but they weren't drafting women at that time, that if you go in the service, you may end up in Vietnam, you may end up in some other war that down the road that you may not agree with, but once you're in the service, you don't have a choice. When you raise your right hand, you agree to follow orders from the president on down to your sergeant. And we gave them that point of view. The younger kids, they were more interested in the war itself, and experiences they asked questions that did you kill any people? What type of bombings did you see? And it was very difficult at that age to talk to them about choices, and just tried to give them, an overview of what it's like.
And another thing that you worked a lot on, specifically when you were in the VA hospital, was veterans claims. People come in trying to upgrade their dishonorable discharges. I know you had a story with someone, you helped him get 100% service connection for his AIDS because of his substance abuse. Can you talk about a little bit of your time at the office and the kind of people that came in and what kind of claims they were looking for?
I first started with the New York State, it was called the New York State Division of Veterans Affairs in 1982. And initially our offices were in the World Trade Center, and we hosted traveling discharge upgrade boards. The Army would send in a discharge upgrade board to here. The Marine Corps the Navy/Marine Corps would send in one, the Air Force would send in one. And these boards were here to hear claims of veterans who got bad paper. Bad paper means less than honorable discharge. And a lot of these bad paper were linked to drug abuse, and drug abuse was linked to what was happening in Vietnam, what they experienced. Sometimes a bad paper for other reasons. We were more successful than pretty much any other organization. The only other organization really doing that was the Red Cross, and I think the American Legion. I'm not sure, but these were traveling boards, and we held the hearings right there in the World Trade Center. And I'm pretty sure we had a success rate of over 50%, and that was unheard of. Usually, guys apply to get the discharge upgraded. You know, their chances were nil before we started doing these boards. And what was the other question? Okay, all right, in a hospital. Okay, so around.
Oh, can you talk about the hooch?
Yeah. So around 1984, we were already out of the World Trade Center. We were moved from the World Trade Center to a state building on Broadway, and then I was eventually transferred to Brooklyn, which I was actually hired for, was Brooklyn. And I spent half my 3 days a week in an office, initially at Brooklyn Borough Hall, but then we were moved to the basement of the Brooklyn War Memorial, which was in a park in Cabot Plaza. And I spent the other 2 days a week at Borough Hall, Staten Island. And we would, veterans would come in and file claims. We were accredited representatives, so we would help the veterans with their claims. And at some point, I approached the director of the VA hospital in Brooklyn, Jim Farcetta, and said, I have thoughts about we could help veterans more directly if we had an office in the hospital. I got permission from my bosses to do that, obviously. So he thought it was a good idea, and we ended up opening a double office. He took 2 offices on 5 West at the time at the VA hospital in Brooklyn, and combined them into one office. We had 2 counselors there, myself and another counselor, and we had a secretary, which was really helpful. And people like literally lined up in the hallway for us to help them with the claims. And it also helped on one side of us were all the offices of the psychiatrists and the psychologists that were seeing these veterans. And the other side of us was a place called the Hooch, which was a space that the veterans had to themselves. They put up decorations and names of people who passed, and just a lot of artwork related to the war. And it's still, they managed to transfer a lot of it to where they are now on the 14th floor. And it was a comfortable space for them. There was always coffee, being brewed, and some people would bring donuts or whatever. And they would go on trips. They would go on trips to the wall in Washington. They would do other trips to other memorials, and that was part of their healing process. These were all almost, let's say 90% of these veterans were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And that was something that VVA fought very hard to get that recognized as disorder. It was not recognized until I think it was DSM-3 came out. That's a diagnostic manual it's an official diagnostic manual for disorders and stuff. And that came out, 1981? 1980. And that was the first time that PTSD was recognized as a real thing. And it was a real thing, trust me, for a lot more years than that, And you go back to World War II, to World War I. They called it battle fatigue, shell shock. There was a whole lot of different terms for it, but it was never really recognized as a disorder until 1980. And the VA just started to recognize claims for that in 1980. And there was one gentleman that I think Lena wants me to talk about, that he had AIDS and he wasn't doing well. And he wanted to fight to get benefits to leave his wife and kids, so they would have something. And he got AIDS from drug abuse, needles, and we were able to establish a timeline where he served in combat in Vietnam. He saw a lot of combat in Vietnam. We were able to establish that by getting his military records. And the fact that his discharge paper showed that he received certain awards, like a combat infantry badge, which is one of these. And so we established that he had PTSD. Then we established that his drug abuse was self-medication due to his PTSD. Of course, the VA hospital wasn't really, at the time that he started getting symptoms, they weren't really doing anything with PTSD. And once we established that the drug abuse was secondary to his PTSD, through self-medication, then we established that the AIDS was from the PTSD, from the drug abuse. And they recognized that they gave him 100% retroactive for a few years, because he was fighting this claim for so many years before he even saw me. And we got him like about 4 or 5 years retroactive benefits. At that time, that was a real lot of money. Still is, I guess. And when he passed, his wife continued to receive benefits, and his kids, until they were 18, continued to receive benefits. So that was something I've always felt really good about. If I did one thing in this world with my job, that was something that I would cling to.
And I think in the same year, you got a lot of recognition for that work you were doing. That was with the 1982 Memorial Commission by Mayor Ed Koch. You were asked to serve by your roommate, right, Peter? Yeah. He asked you to serve on around 100 members that the mayor organized. And he wanted to organize and fund a memorial for Vietnam veterans solely. And the commission did not only contribute to the completion of the memorial, but also develop the parade, which would take over New York City 3 years later. So on May 6, 1985, Vietnam veterans were honored with the largest ticker tape parade in U.S. history. Did you know it was the largest? All that confetti you were shredding in the office. You want to talk about that? The confetti shredding? Over 1 million New Yorkers showed up to celebrate the 30,000 veterans who never got a proper welcome home. And this is these are your words when I interviewed you. You said, "It felt good. I felt a purpose. I felt the parade was very important. This was our parade, our welcome home parade. We didn't get one, so we decided to make one for ourselves." And John said everybody came out of the closet, and half the people didn't know what the hell they were doing there. I mean, what group they were going to march with or whatever. They just said, "Oh, I'm Brooklyn. I'll go with the Brooklyn guys," or "I'm a cop. I'll get on the cops list." So I think your words are a testament to like the kind of sense of belonging that the 1985 parade had for you. And I mean, this was even larger than the one in DC, which was the federal parade. And I think New York City parade that you guys organized was really a turning point in American intellectual history and how a lot of people saw veterans. Do you want to talk about you marching down and what you saw in the high-rise building windows?
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, you're talking about the confetti shredding. One of the things I did, I was still working with the New York State Division of Veterans Affairs, and my boss was a really great guy, John Larkin, who I lost touch with. I don't even know if he's still alive. But he actually just loaned me out to the Memorial Day Parade Commission. I pretty much worked full-time for the commission, at being paid by New York State Division of Veterans Affairs. So it really worked out great. And one of the jobs I was doing was collecting confetti to be thrown out of buildings and such. So we went to places that donated, had that places that had big shredders. And they had shred, like on Wall Street, they shredded a lot of, daily they shredded like tons of stuff. So we just got big, huge big, huge garbage bags full of confetti. And we dropped, shredded paper, confetti, same thing. And we dropped them off at every building along the route from along the Canyon Hills. It started at Cabin Plaza and across the Brooklyn Bridge and down the Canyon of Heroes. And it was, and the people were glad to take the confetti. It was not like, oh, don't bother. And these were like superintendents or doormen and elevator operators or whatever. And I said, no, get this up to the high floors, get to the people, and share, no problem, And everybody was on board. It seems like, we were throwing this parade for ourselves, it seemed, but all of a sudden everybody was like cooperating. And we were used to getting doors slammed in our face, and we couldn't believe all of a sudden. Yeah. So, that's another story. So, we got to the parade itself. It started at Cabin Plaza. I was marching with Vietnam Veterans of America, my chapter, 72. And there were people marching with sanitation department, police department, transit. Several guys who belonged to same units were marching together. And I remember going across the bridge, and obviously there's nobody cheering you on when you're going across the bridge because you're just crossing a bridge. But when we're getting closer to the Manhattan side, all the buildings that were like overlooking the bridge, the people hang out the windows cheering us on and stuff like that. And a couple occasions, a couple of women would bare their breasts out the window. Their salute to us, I guess. It was funny, I know it's not necessarily funny to a lot of people now, but at that time it was pretty funny. Talk about 1985. How many people here were born in 1985, since 1985? So I know it's hard to understand some of this stuff.
And you met two guys from your unit.
Yeah, I met two guys from my unit who I hadn't been in touch with at all, and we hooked up. And after the parade was over, we stayed together, and there was a lot of different things going on. There were hospitality suites. VVA had a hospitality suite in some hotel, and we kind of went there, got drunk, went to another hospitality suite, got a little bit more drunk. Then they had an event on the Intrepid. They had
Sanitation.
Well, I'll get to that. What's that singer? I thought the disc jockey, the female, Chris Noel. Chris Noel was a DJ in Vietnam, and very attractive woman. And she came out and she would visit the troops in the fields a lot, and she was being honored on the Intrepid, and she was going to be speaking. So we were making our way there, and again, we were by then we were pretty drunk. Everybody was, but for the most part. But the funniest sight I saw was right inside the gate to the Intrepid. There was a pile of garbage bags, and one of my close friends, who was a sanitation worker, mechanic actually, was sprawled out on these bags like, hey, you know. I thought I took a picture of it, but I couldn't find it. And probably he's glad I can't find it. And then we went to see Intrepid, and we kind of like made our way down to the memorial eventually, because it was really being dedicated at nighttime, and they had like fireworks and everything, and they had the dedication for the memorial. The memorial itself, I don't know if anybody knows about the New York City Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's like a brick glass structure at 55 Water Street, Vietnam Veterans Plaza. It's called Vietnam Plaza now. It's right next to 55 Water Street. The 55 Water Street donated the space, and it has etched in it letters that were written to and from Vietnam veterans. So letters from their family members or girlfriends to them, letters from them, letters home. And just a collection of these letters was took over several years. Bernie Edelman was part of that, and Pete Mahoney primarily. And it eventually ended up in a book. The letters ended up letters home, right? And Dear America, right? Letters from Vietnam, right? And it became a documentary on HBO. And it was pretty, like we're talking about, again, 85, 86, 87. And it was a very moving experience. It was a change, I think, between that and the wall in Washington. Changed the way Americans perceived Vietnam veterans. I remember when I first started my job, again around 82, 83, when we were still in the World Trade Center, my boss told us we had to go to the VFW American Legion and join these organizations and, you know, let them know that you're the state veterans counselor for the district, and, you know, try to, like, you know, become accredited through them as well as through New York State. I don't know why, but so it was at the time I was living in Park Slope, and I went to American Legion post that was practically around the corner from where I lived on 9th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue. And it was a big hall. It was actually, it used to be a synagogue, and it is now American Legion post. And, you know, most American Legion posts, they have a bar in the front, then they have a hall in the back or downstairs where they have meetings and they hold events. So it was summertime, I believe, and yeah, I was wearing a suit and tie, and of course I just came from work, and I knocked at the door. The door was locked. It was a screen door, but it was locked. So I could see people at the bar, so I knocked the door. The bartender came around and says, what do you want? Now, at the time, I don't even think I had a beard time. I think I just had a big bushy mustache and maybe a bushy hair. That's about it, you know. But I was wearing like probably a 3-piece suit at the time. And I introduced myself, and I said I was just newly appointed as Veterans Counsel for this district, and I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I'd like to talk about joining your organization. I'd like to come in and meet you guys. So he says, and this is like, he still hasn't unlocked the door. He says, Well, come back when the commander's here. They meet at whatever, Thursday nights or whatever, and he didn't invite me in, have a beer, nothing. Just walked away and left the door locked, That was my experience with the American Legion. My experience with the VFW was much different, partly because the counsel for our agency, whose office was near mine, right next to mine at the World Trade Center, Sandy, I can't remember his last name, he knew the guys from this particular VFW post, also in Park Slope, that was at the Armory on 8th Avenue. So they invited me down. They had a meeting Sunday mornings. I went down Sunday morning. They made breakfast there because it was an army. They had a kitchen and everything, so they made breakfast and everything. So I made breakfast. And before I knew it, they elected me like junior vice commander, like the first day, So that was that was a totally different experience, which is the reason why I'm still a member of the VFW. That's the only other organization I'm a member of besides the Vietnam Veterans of America.
VFW has some, beef with Vietnam Veterans of America now because McManus is the president. He doesn't really like VFW. But, so talking about VVA's current work, they're working on accounting for all POWs and MIAs, toxic exposure studies, which you guys won in 1991 with the Agent Orange Exposure Act, and the PACT Act in 2022, which basically gives all the veterans a list of disabilities that they can be, they have the rights to claim benefits for, which the current administration is now trying to back out on, even though it was signed by the Republicans. And I guess what I want to end on is kind of all the work that VVA did is now being trampled on. That the GOP spending bill for 2025 proposes billions cut from the Toxic Exposure Fund, which was something that VVA worked a lot on, Agent Orange, burn pits, and all of that, especially in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And as everyone knows, firing a bunch of employees from the Veterans Administration, that's probably going to affect the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and the VVA worked a lot with helping veterans who were suffering from depression, PTSD, and all of those. An attempt to end union rights for federal employees, including those of the VA, and as I mentioned, fierce opposition to the PACT Act. So as VVA comes to an end, because VVA is going to be a last man standing organization, which means that they're not going to pass on or open membership to any non-Vietnam veteran members, but they are going to pass it on to Vets Voices of America, right? McManus wants to, the current president of VVA, Jack McManus, wants to pass it on to Vets Voices of America, which a lot of VVA members are opposed to. But I guess my question for you is right now, amidst all of this, what do you want to say to the younger veterans who still have a lot of time left?
Well, first, I want to say that the younger veterans had a lot to say to us, and they thanked us immensely. They said, every time one of the jobs I had when I was with the New York State Veterans Affairs is when Iraq and Afghanistan started heating up, all the reserve units and National Guard units who never go to war in my lifetime, and had never gone to war in my lifetime, except maybe some small, one or two maybe National Guard units in Vietnam, but for the most part, National Guard units and even the reserves are basically, to protect the homeland, if we get invaded or something, They were used in Korea. But I guess that was in my lifetime, but I was a kid, so it doesn't count. But I would go to a brief, this is when I worked with the federal, right? After I was a state veterans counselor from 98 I was state veterans counselor from 82 to 91, and in 91, I went to work with the U.S. Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Service. And part of our job was to educate and enforce the USERA, Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So that basically to anybody that has to leave their job for military service, they have to get that job back on what they call an escalator clause, not rejoining the job where they left it, but where they would have obtained had they stayed on a job the whole time they were in the military. And because of all the mobilizations of Guard and Reserve units, this came into play a lot. Employers weren't used to it, and they didn't particularly like it. So we had taken a lot of them to court, and we won. If we investigated a case and thought that it was meritorious, and the employer would not go along with our findings, it would be referred to the U.S. Attorney for prosecution. Usually, I was able to convince the employer to go along with it. We present them with the facts, and they says, "Listen, once it goes to U.S., so we don't issue press releases." I told the employers, "We don't. Our investigations are private." But once it goes to U.S. Attorney, the first thing that you're going to do is put out a press release announcing that they're suing you because you wouldn't take a soldier back after you served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that was my stick, carrot, the stick, and we didn't have too many cases have to go to U.S. Attorney, and the ones that did go to U.S. Attorney, we won. Police Department went to U.S. Attorney. NYPD. It had to do with pensions. They didn't want to give pension credit to the police officers while they served in the military. And that was against the law. I had one case against Major League Baseball. A guy, I can't remember his name, but he played for the Philadelphia Athletics, I think at the time, was the original team. Back prior to World War II. And then he went to World War II. He came back after World War II. He was wounded, but he did go to spring training. He was a pitcher, and apparently he just didn't have enough of stuff to make it a major league level. So he was cut during spring training. So Major League Baseball did not recognize that for pension credit because they said that he was never came back. He never was employed by Major League Baseball. And he said, "No, I got a contract right here." He shows me his contract that was signed by I forgot the name of the owner. The field was named after him. Yeah. And that was a real interesting case. Some of these cases were really interesting, and some of them, you had to really fight hard. But they were worth it. And what I remember most is just the younger veterans coming up to me and say, "Thank you. You guys made it easier for us. With the VA, with everything, it made it easier for us." And an old friend of mine who's no longer with us, I think you know him, Bob Green, told me one time the fact that the reason why the younger veterans look up to us so much is because we walked point for them. We endured all their trials and tribulations to make their path easier.
Danny, I wanted to say personally how grateful I am for the fact that you've come back once again at my request your request, our request to talk with us. And I really mean it, and I thank you very, very much.
And thank you for your service as well.
There's an I'd like to give it about 5 minutes for questions, but we don't have much time because the next group needs to come in. Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay, I just want to ask something. With the with what's what's happening with the Trump administration and with the cuts to Medicaid threats and other stuff, how does the whole veterans thing relate to what's happening with the Trump administration going on?
Well, all the major veterans organizations, including VVA, have lobbyists in Washington, and these organizations are all outraged by these cuts and the proposed cuts. I know we had, for the Brooklyn VA hospital, 19 probation employees were terminated. Another 7 took the voluntary retirement. None of these people could be replaced because they're technically on administrative leave. And there's hiring freezes anyway. They're not filling any vacancies. So when somebody leaves or retires, they're not being replaced, and that diminishes the services to veterans. And one thing even Republicans don't want to take a hit on is taking away things from veterans. So they'll do it behind closed doors, but once we bring it into light, they most likely will back down somewhat.
We have time for one more question.
Did I answer your question? Did I answer your question,
Go ahead.
sir?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was originally proposed that they would cut the entire toxic exposure fund. But after the VVA and the VFW stood up to the Trump administration, they allowed at least $6 billion out of the $23 billion, which that's still a lot of cuts. But I guess what I mean by saying that is that your guys' words mean a lot. Like when you bring it up to the administration, even though they're the executive and you guys are a nonprofit, the fact that you served and that you are Vietnam veterans, when you say something, it gets shit done, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. Well, thank you, Danny, very, very much. Our next group is coming in just about now.
Thank you so much.